Next, we have House File 2563, the Omnibus Legacy Bill. Chair Vang and Chair McDonald, welcome to the testifiers' podium. Members, this is a bill that will also be awaiting the Senate file, so at the end of today's discussion, we will be laying this bill over. Chair Vang is the lead co-author. I don't know, we have new terms around here. So Chair Vang, I will move the bill before us for discussion, I guess. It's not really before us. Please go ahead with your remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will start with a high overview of the bill, and then I'll defer to my co-chair here to say any final remarks before we have nonpartisan staff go through the spreadsheet if you would like. So this bill allocates about $779 million in projects in every corner of our great state. Every single district is made better by the work being funded in this bill to protect our lakes, our rivers, groundwater, drinking water, to restore and protect, enhance our habitat, to support our parks and trails, and to preserve our arts and cultural heritage. Legacy has 4 funds, 3 of which are biennial and 1 which is annual. About $163 million is annual spending from the Outdoor Heritage Fund, $304 million from the Clean Water Fund, $130 million from the Parks and Trails Fund, and $180 million from the Arts and Cultural Heritage. Legacy funds are all one-time spending. There's no base or permanent FTEs with legacy dollars. That's part of what makes Legacy special. And with each Legacy bill, we see new projects and a new focus. And just to go a little bit more in detail of each of the funds, for the Outdoor Heritage Fund, we took the recommendations of the LaSalle Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council, about 47 projects preserving 107,000 acres of wildlife habitat. And then the Clean Water Fund, $304 million to clean up our waters. These are recommendations from the Clean Water Council and the governor. There are 61 projects and programs being funded in this bill. Much of it go from state agencies to local governments and conservation districts to do work on the ground. With Parks and Trail Fund, $130 million to strengthen our parks and trail systems. This bill follows the long-standing tacit agreement of 40-40-20 split for state parks, DNR, Metro Parks, and the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails. This year we have, that's unique this year, is $500,000 in spending on a partnership between our Parks Agency and the Wilderness Inquiry. And then finally, our 4th fund, Arts and Culture Heritage, $180 million. The State Arts Board received its statutory 47%. We work to fund our state agencies and organizations doing good work. We also directed large amounts of money to competitive grant programs rather than direct appropriations to individual organizations and nonprofits. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I'll defer to my co-chair for any further remarks.
Chair McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, yes, thank you, Chair Vang. This was a really good committee to be on. And we, the Legacy does a lot of important things in the state. I was a Legacy naysayer for 14 years, and I'm a believer now. These funds are very responsibly spent in our state. As you can see, the spreadsheets in front of you, the projects that are in the bill go to various, as Chair Vang said, various great causes: clean water, parks and trails, outdoor heritage, restoration of our prairie lands and our habitats, and then arts and culture. I'm a believer of this Legacy, and I'll probably vote for it in 2033 as long as we continue to be responsible with the taxpayers' dollars. What you have in front of you is a very responsible Legacy bill. And you want a picture of Representative Living? Okay, as a photographer, I always pose for the camera. We have a very responsible Legacy bill, and as Chair Vang had mentioned, we have over $17 million for a grant application that will hopefully have many projects that will be vetted by a group of people that will have the time to do it, to disperse the funds on some great art projects throughout our state, throughout all 87 counties. So with that, I don't have any closing remarks at this point because we'll maybe there's some questions, Chair Vang, and I'll refer it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Chairs. I will bring the nonpartisan staff forward now, Mr. Hagmeyer and Ms. Taylor, to walk through the spreadsheet and the bill. Thank you, Mr. Hagemeyer, for the spreadsheet.
Mr. Chair, I'm Brad Hagemeyer with the House Fiscal Analysis Department. I will go through the spreadsheet at kind of a higher level, and I think Chair Vang did a great job talking about it already. I don't want to read each line of this here, but the first page, actually the first 3 pages you'll see are the Outdoor Heritage Fund. This is the fund that has annual recommendations of the 4, and as it was stated, there's no base, so there's no tails numbers to look at, and the recommendations for this particular fund are made from the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council, and they were fully adhered to it in this bill. If you look at page 3 on line 117, you'll see the total appropriation is $162,111,000 the first year of the biennium, and just a little bit for the LCC operating budget in the second year, and the rest will be appropriated next year. That was slightly over, each of the funds is required to have a 5% reserve in statute. It was slightly over that, but you'll see on line 120, there was a cancellation of $120,000 to bring it in line, and then lines 124, 5, and 6 are some projects that are asking for an extension that is required to be in the bill. If we want to extend the funds, those are included, and then line 128 is the cancellation of that funding that won't be used to bring it to the 5% reserve level. If you go to page 4, you will see the start of the Clean Water Fund. And again, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to read each one of these projects. These are what are recommended by the Clean Water Council and the governor's recommendations and have been fully adhered to in the bill that's in front of you. This is a biennial recommendation number. And then if you go to the end of page 5, you'll see the total appropriation is $303,926,000. And then the one addition that was made in the House bill is on page 6, and that is line 221, and that's a extension for Ash River Sanitary Sewer Collection and Treatment System. And the amounts you see listed for the extensions are just the estimate of how much will be extended beyond the current term of the appropriation. On line 223 is the Parks and Trails Fund, and again, as Chair Vang mentioned, this represents the 40-40-20 split that has been historically adhered to for the last 10 years or so. The 40% going to the state parks is on line 221. And again, there's a carve out of that money for wilderness inquiry for a grant. And then line 229 is the amount going for the greater Minnesota Parks and Trails outside the metro area. That'd be the 20%. And then that's actually slightly higher. It's 41,000 higher from 2 appropriations that they're asking to be canceled and reappropriated to them. The next couple lines are the administrative budget pieces, and then the wilderness inquiry grant out of the greater Minnesota Parks and Trails. On line 233 is the coordination among partners, so the Metro Parks, State Parks, and the greater Minnesota Parks and Trails, in order for them to all work together on projects and make the system a whole, they get appropriation off the top. And then on line 235, you'll see the 40% appropriation for the Metropolitan Council parks, and that it mirrors the 40% for the state parks. And then you'll see just a small appropriation on line 240 for the LCC Commission website, which is a great website. It has all the projects posted on it. If members aren't aware of that, you can look up any of the legacy funded projects on there. In total, there is $130,167,000 being appropriated to the Parks and Trails Fund. And then line 251 through 257 are a number of extensions that were asked for on various park and trail projects. And then if you go to page 7, there's a couple of cancellations that I mentioned from previous greater Minnesota Parks and Trails appropriations in order to make the money stay with their 20% instead of being further divided. And then on line 263 is the start of the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Since this one doesn't have a recommendation from anyone or a standing split like the 40-40-20, I'll go through this in a little bit more detail. On line 266 is the State Arts Board, and in statute that's required to receive 47% of the funds. And you'll see that's the only recommendation that the governor makes out of the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Lines 267, 68, and 69 are what are being recommended for that 47% from the State Arts Board, excuse me. And then you'll see there's 2 additional projects added in, creative art, music performances and productions for $400,000, and then youth literary grants on line 273 for $500,000. In total, there's just over $85 million going to the State Arts Board. On line 275 is the Minnesota Historical Society. There's just under $14 million for statewide historic and cultural grants, $15.5 million for statewide history programs, $5.7 million for history partnerships, and then $750 for both the statewide survey of historical and archaeological sites, and then $750 for the digital library. And then 2 grants were added in for historical competitive building grants, and that's $1.5 million. And then there's $250,000 for the special guerrilla units, veterans, and families. In total, there's just $38.5 million for the Minnesota Historical Society. There's $6 million to the Department of Education for the regional public libraries. On line 293 is the Department of Admin. There's $2 million for Minnesota Public Radio, $4.1 million for Amherst Public Radio, $9.5 million for Minnesota Public Television. You'll see a blank line for the Wilderness Inquiry Canoe Mobile, which is being funded out of the Parks and Trails Fund. You'll see line 299, there's $3 million for the Como Zoo, $500,000 for the Great Lakes Aquarium, and $150,000 for the Bakken Museum. So $19.25 million going through the Department of Administration. On line 335 is the Minnesota Zoo. There's $2.35 million for the Minnesota Zoo. Then if you flip to the last page, the Humanities Center runs a number of grants. You'll see the Humanities Center programs receive $5 million. Then there's $25,000 for outreach on grant opportunities for the Humanities Center. There's $1 million for Children's Museum grants. And then the pot of money that Chair McDonald was talking about is the $17.5 million on line 355 for community identity and heritage grants. And then of that, there's $1.5 million per year for community festival grants. On line 359, there's $500,000 for ethnic media grants, $200,000 for youth poet laureate grants, $100,000 for Neo-Muralismos de Mexico. There's $200,000 for the Lundstrom Center for Performing Arts, and $350,000 for United Hmong Family. In total, there's just under $25 million going through the Humanities Center. On line 379 is the Indian Affairs Council. In total, there's $2 million being appropriated, and that goes for grants to Minnesota tribal nations to preserve Dakota and Ojibwe languages, Dakota and Ojibwe Indian education and immersion efforts, and then the protection of Indian graves. On line 386 is the Department of Education. There's $1 million for county fairs, and then there's $500,000 for Minnesota Future Farmers of America with a carve out for their 100-year event. And then you'll see the small appropriation for the LCC for the website. In total, there's just under $180 million being appropriated out of the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. And then line 401, you'll see 1 extension for St. Paul Cultural Art installation from the laws of 23. That's all I have on the spreadsheet, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hagemeyer. Ms. Taylor.
Mr. Chair, members, Janelle Taylor with House Research. House File 2563 is mostly an appropriation bill. There is one policy section that I'll point out in the first 3 articles, which are the ones that I cover, and that's page 45, section 13. This section would require the recommendations that the Clean Water Council submits to the legislature to be broken out by fiscal year, not a biennial total. And then I'll turn it over to Ms. Davis. She has a few.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Chair and members. Mary Davis from House Research. There are just 2 policy provisions in the arts article. The first one's on page 71, and it's section 12. It adds 2 new provisions to the statute that deals with arts and cultural heritage grants. And the first part is requiring a recent 990 tax form in order to be a grantee. And the second one is prohibiting the use of arts and cultural heritage funds from capital construction costs, and it does have exceptions for historical site preservation, care collection in museums, accessibility modifications, and exhibits and art installations. The second section is section 13 of the arts article, and it's the one that Mr. Hagemeyer just referenced. It updates a prior appropriation from 2023 for funding for the SUNY Lee statue or memorial or painting, and it just allows those funds to be used into the next into the next fiscal biennium, and it also updates who the funding is going to.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Any questions from members for either, any of the nonpartisan? Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was reading through this as quick as I could. Are there any appropriations in here to purchase new land, or is it only to improve the land we currently have?
Ms. Taylor.
Mr. Chair, Representative, there are a number of appropriations that would allow the acquisition of land in the Outdoor Heritage Fund section.
Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you happen to know how much money is set aside to purchase additional land?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council staff may have that. If
Do we
you
have
wanna
a
give us
volunteer?
A few minutes.
Welcome to committee. Please identify yourself for the record and answer the question.
Mr. Chair, thank you. For the record, my name is Mark Johnson. I'm the Executive Director for the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council. Mr. Chair and Senator Rarick, pardon me, Representative Rarick, my apologies. I don't have the exact figures because I've got a printout from prior to the adjustments that were made at the February forecast. But from a monetary standpoint, for protect and fee with PILT, there is $22,500,000 approximately. For protecting and fee without PILT, that is $16,512. Or pardon me, 16 million, I'm sorry, 512,000 approximately. And for protect and easement, there's approximately 44.5 million.
Thank you. A follow-up, Representative Rarick.
I have a different question after that. Mr. Chair, I was just wondering, so they talked about on page 72 that we're going to be now requiring a 990. What are we going to be looking at on the 990?
Ms. Davis.
Chair and members, the requirement would just be that somebody seeking grant funding from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund would have to have a 990 and present it. But there's no qualification related to that in the current language.
Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So step one, I guess you need a 990. Step two is you know what you're looking at, and you actually make some decisions based on what you see in the 990. So at least we're making baby steps in the right direction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for the nonpartisan staff? Seeing none, we'll bring the chairs back to the testifiers table. And any questions for the chairs of the Legacy Committee? Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the co-chairs for your work on this bill. I do have concerns on line 60.29 and 60.30. This has to do with the famous Litchfield Opera House. And I'm wondering, in the absence of Representative Erdahl being present, how in the world this made it into this bill.
Thank you, Representative Scott.
Mr. Chair, I think I can answer that.
Chair McDonald.
Yeah, can I call Representative Erdahl, a former member, and ask him why he yet wants more money? Representative Scott, yes, this is the last request, I'm told, from Representative
You
Erdahl.
heard it here first, folks.
Yes.
Don't believe it. Last request for this year.
He told me that.
Representatives, please maintain decorum in this committee. Any other questions for the chairs? Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, chairs, to both of you for your work. I just want to ask the children's museums. I'd heard some concern about funding relating to that. Do you know? I see that there's $1 million total, $500,000 per year. Do you know how that compares to the past total funding that's gone out to children's museums? You happen to know that? I maybe should have asked while the staff was still up.
Chair Vang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Pinto. To the question regarding the funding amounts of this year compared to last year, it is definitely a cut.
Okay.
Historically, the Children's Museum, various museums, they will probably get direct appropriations, but now it's in a competitive pool of grant. And so, and this amount of funding is definitely a cut to what they usually get.
Mr. Hagemeyer, do you want to bring some specifics to this question? Mr. Hagemeyer.
Mr. Chair, it varies a little bit year to year. I think the last biennium is 1.6 million per year.
Thank you.
So one-
Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was 1.6? Is that?
I believe that's what he said,
Okay.
yes.
Yep,
Yeah,
Mr.
and-
Chair is 1.6 per year, so it's 3.2 for the biennium.
Thank you. And I think Chair McDonald wanted to say something as well, Mr. Chair.
Chair McDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Pinto, as you may be aware, and if you're not, I'll let you know, but I think you probably will, that the Department of Revenue had to transfer, I wanted to say confiscate, but I'll say transfer because it's more fair, over $31 million. There was an overpayment from a tax entity for 15 years. So they had to transfer over $31 million from the legacy funds to the Department of Revenue. We were notified, Chair Vang and I, last month. So consequently, having that kind of money, which is significant, as you will probably agree, we had to make some serious concerns and hard decisions, and that was one of them.
Okay. And
you.
final, Mr. Chair, if I may-
Representative
so I'll just think, and so, yeah, I totally respect that, Chair McDonald. And so hopefully, as you move to conference, maybe there'll be an opportunity to see what you can do relating to children's museums. Certainly want to support them if we can. And then I just want to make the point more broadly that, and this is praise for the two of you and kind of for all of us, is that I think that this work through legacy funding for our parks, for our trails, for humanities, is such a contrast, and I think we'll end up sort of filling gaps that I think we're seeing coming from the federal government, and I so much appreciate. I know there's major cuts in the National Endowments for the Arts, for our forests and national parks, et cetera, coming down, and we can at least feel really good in our state about the progress being made. And so I thank you so much for your work. This is something we can be very proud of as a Minnesota thing that we've done for many years, and continuing this as well. So I'm grateful to you for that kind of counter to the national trend. Thank you, Chair.
Representative Stevenson, any remarks?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to both chairs of the Legacy Committee who did excellent work this year on this bill, and I encourage members to support that excellent work.
Thank you, Representative Stevenson. Any final remarks, Chair Vang or Chair McDonald, whoever wants to go first?
Thank
Chair
you,
Vang.
Mr. Chair. I just want to thank the committee for their support and consideration. I think Co-Chair McDonald and I have worked well together to reach a compromise and hopefully to make as many members and our stakeholders as happy as possible. So thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Chair Vang. Chair McDonald.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and my apologies. It's my first visit, I think, to the Ways and Means after 14 years, and I did bring some blueberry muffins, but I left them upstairs on the third floor. So my apologies. We took the letter to heart, chairs both, that you sent us for the earmarks on our bill, so you'll probably notice that, and I think you'll appreciate that, that we try to keep a clean bill, as they say around here in the legislature, and not to have it marked with a Christmas tree of earmarks. So I think that's one thing that Chair Vang and I and our committee, we had Representative Lilly and Representative Heinzman on our committee, and I think that's it from this Ways and Means. So we had a really good committee, and I think we have a great bill. As long as the Senate just adopts ours, we'll be in good shape, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you to both of the chairs for your work. If the committee would indulge me for just a moment, since it is Mary Murphy Day, I would note that the legacy amendment passed in 2008, and I was first elected to this body in 2008. And in 2009, I joined the Legacy Committee for the very first time in its existence. And Mary Murphy happened to be the chair of the first Legacy Committee, for those of you that may or may not remember that. And true to her demeanor, she would regularly give us homework. She would assign us, for instance, to bring in pictures of our connection with various aspects of the legacy bill and other homework items. So we'll just say that today's bill that's being laid over is also in honor of Representative Mary Murphy. This bill is laid over.